Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Is that all right? All right. Let me know if I'm too loud or too soft, please. So yes, I don't know if you could tell, but I am the perfect height for a competitive figure skater. So that was when I was much, much younger, before I hit about the age of 12 and did about a 3-inch growth spurt in one summer and realized that my arms and legs were in way different places than they ever were before, and decided that that probably was not a career path for me. So took a hard left after that. But yes, it was an interesting childhood. How many of you are ever familiar with the figure skating world? Do you follow it? Ever heard of the name Elaine Zayak? She was a world champion many years ago. Well, when I was 8, I beat her in a competition. I'm just saying, okay? So when I was 8, not when she was world champion, when I was 8. So, and my brother, who was also a competitive figure skater, and actually made it pretty far. He was actually 3rd in the United States at one point. But he teases me about that. He's like, but you beat Elaine Zayak. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. And I really appreciate your time and attendance. The way I do a training is I like it to be conversational. So please share your thoughts, share your stories, because we all have them. And because I think it makes it a little bit more interesting and a little bit more entertaining if we can do that. So this is actually part of one of the modules in our Core Champion Achievement Program. So this actually falls under the practice part. So if you are going for your Core Champion Achievement Certificate, this would fall under your practice module. And really, these modules are so important for us as professionals. So many of us, we get bogged down with the day-to-day, and we very rarely take the time to step away and learn from each other. And I always learn something new at these conferences, and there's always some little tidbit I can take away and say, wow, that might work where I am. And so it's really an opportunity for all of us to go back to the basics and to learn from each other and to put these things back into practice in the real world, in our courts and in our everyday jobs. So why are we doing this? Well, it strengthens our profession, right? It makes sure that we keep going back and we keep looking to the basics and learning from them, and we refresh. This morning's conversation about just customer service, you think that's a very basic concept, but I don't know about you, but he really had me thinking about a lot of what I do on the day-to-day, whether it be with our internal customers or our external. So I think it's really important that we strengthen what we do and what we learn each day. And then it increases our exposure to the core. So it gives us back to those 3 core modules, and then we can bring it back to our courts and we can apply it. Also, it's great because it gives us all some sort of standardization. We all know what to expect from each other. And then also it's an opportunity to gain some recognition through certificates. Who doesn't like a good certificate? So here's just some of our basic Core Champion programs. So as you can see, you're going to be in the Core Practice Specialist if you complete all 8 competencies in the practice module. Once you have completed the session, you're going to go ahead and, as they were saying earlier, complete that structured response form. And then once you have done that, in order to receive the Core Champion Achievement Award, they're going to ask you to actually write an article and say, how did you learn from this Core Champion Achievement program, and how have you applied it? And that could also be actually published in the NACM publication. So again, please take advantage of that. I think it's a great opportunity for all of us to learn from each other. So what are we going to learn and cover today? Well, we're going to talk about public relations. Now, when I was a kid, there was this individual on TV, and I don't know how many of you are from the New York area, but it was Crazy Eddie. Do you remember Crazy Eddie? Okay, Crazy Eddie sold appliances, and he acted crazy on TV commercials. And he said, come on down to Crazy Eddie's because you are going to get some crazy deals. Public relations, we don't have to advertise to get customers, right? They're coming to us whether they want to or not. Crazy Eddie had to throw it out there and had to send that message out there that I am better than the rest of them. That's not what public relations in the judiciary is all about. Public relations in the judiciary is actually about building trust. It's getting people to understand what it is we do day to day. So we're going to learn a little bit about that. We're going to talk about who we're communicating with, who's our customers. Also, what's important, what we can and can't say publicly. When it comes to public relations, a lot of you have cases that may come up in your courts that the media is very interested in. How do you handle that? How do you know where your boundaries are and what could be said that might be overstepping and where you need to draw that line? And then we're going to talk about some different tools, some traditional tools and some of the newer, more digital versions of communication tools. And then hopefully we'll take away some practical tips and best practices when it comes to public relations. Okay. So why does public relation matter in the courts? Because as I said, they're coming to us. We don't have to go out there. We're not Crazy Eddie. We're not trying to bring in customers, right? They're finding us. So why does it matter to us? Anybody have any thoughts or ideas? If they don't understand what we're doing, what can happen? External factors can affect their trust in the courts, their belief in that we're unbiased. Yes, ma'am. Funding. Absolutely. How many of you have in your executive branch, your legislative branch, have to explain what it is we do over and over and over again? It's a constant conversation. I actually had a meeting with a mayor once and had to explain the 3 branches of government to him. I said, you're an elected mayor and you don't understand the 3 branches of government. So we have to have that constant messaging, right? And that's the world that we're living in. People don't understand what role we play. And when that happens, negative messaging can take over. And messaging about how we're not fair, we're not impartial, that we may have different views on those that have money or privilege. And they may get a different outcome in the courts than those that do not. So really, it's all about public perception. And so we're not selling a product. We're not a typical business. However, it's important that our messaging gets out there. So this is from an Annenberg Public Policy Center study that was done in October of 24. Actually, the study was completed in July and August of 24. So 1 year ago today. And it showed that since 2005, when they first did their study, look at the drop in the confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court. It's pretty significant when you think about it. So only 44% of people had trust in the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, we all know the U.S. Supreme Court is the same as the state courts, it's the same as the local courts, right? It's all the same, at least in the public's eyes, right? So when it's negatively seen by the U.S. Supreme Court, it filters down. It's a trickle-down effect. Unfortunately, we bear the brunt of some of the negativity that comes out of the highest court in the land. But what I found interesting in this study is that there is a 47% gap between those that claim to be Republican or Democrat. So it's not just about Americans losing confidence. Now we've become bipartisan in how we see the courts. So again, that's about our messaging. We need to make sure that we continually reinforce our neutrality and that we are not affected by political argument, by bipartisanship. We've got to make sure that that message is out there. So back in August of 24, 71% of Republicans approved of the Supreme Court and only 24% of Democrats. Overall, only 56% of Americans disapproved or said that they had little or no trust in the U.S. Supreme Court, which is pretty daunting when you think about that's the messaging we have to overcome on a daily basis. So when your court users come into your buildings, this is really the climate that they are coming into our courthouses under. So why is this important to us? We're not branding, we're not promoting, we're not marketing. Nobody's being crazy Eddie here. But it's important that we are informing the public. So information is our key tool here. We want to make sure that they understand what it is we do and why the decisions that we make are made. We don't want them having to figure that out. Misinformation is rampant out there. How many of you have ever Googled your court to see what the customer's response is? Yeah, it's pretty disheartening sometimes. How many of you have ever gotten a thank you letter? Oh, aren't they nice? They're few and far between, but when somebody actually takes the time to write you a thank you email or a thank you note, you think, oh, I'm doing something right. The message is getting out there. But unfortunately, we're in a society of negativity sometimes, and the negative gets out there more than the positive. So I always like to say, it's important that we make sure that when we're sharing information with the public, we're making sure that that information is understandable, that it is impartial, unbiased, and that we have clear guidelines in which we're operating. How many of you have had a high-profile case in your court where the media has been all over it? Yeah. How was that interaction with the media? Was it a positive one? Did you have something in place that was able to facilitate that conversation and their need for information? And did they understand your limitations sometimes on your ability to give information? Because sometimes that can be a hindrance, right? We want to be open, we want to be accessible, but we can't give all the information away that they want. So it's important that they understand those boundaries. And then we want to build our credibility because we want to make sure our messaging is consistent. Not only our messaging, but the information that we provide. Our website's easy to understand. Our handouts, our brochures, things of that nature. So ultimately our goal is going to be we're going to promote transparency and we want to enhance public confidence. We want them coming to us as the problem solvers. We want them to trust in the process. And we want to make sure that they have access to correct and accurate information. So I'm going to ask you some questions. Who are our stakeholders? Who are we serving? When it comes to public relations, who are we talking to? I know we just had cake for lunch, but anybody have any ideas? I know the general public's one, but who else are our stakeholders? Who else do we serve? Yes. Lawyers, sheriffs. Yes. Probation, I heard law enforcement.
Okay. Range of agencies, obviously the attorneys, law enforcement. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
And yes, ma'am, you had a comment.
Just the same thing that he said. I was going to say justice partners, like prosecutors, law enforcement, and legal defenders.
Absolutely. What about the news media? Is that a stakeholder?
Obviously, local businesses.
Local businesses, yes, absolutely. And teaching this course for ICM, one of the scenarios I give is a local bank manager, and this actually happened in my courts, where a individual who was suffering from some mental health issues decided to take up residence in their ATM vestibule. They liked it there. It was covered from the climate, and, they could see people, have some conversation if they chose to. However, the bank manager wasn't so happy because people didn't want to come up to the bank window because they were intimidated, they were fearful. And so what would happen, he would get arrested for trespassing or for vagrancy, and he'd end up in jail overnight, and then he'd get out the next day, and where'd he go back to? The ATM vestibule, because that was home, right? That was his comfort level. That was where he wanted to be. It wasn't where the bank manager wanted him to be, but that's where he wanted to be. So the bank manager saw that as whose problem? The courts, right? Because that's how he saw it. He said, why do the courts keep letting these people out? Why aren't they doing something? Not realizing the limitations that we have on us when it comes to handling these matters and the access to various services that we may or may not have. So again, that's a conversation, that's a public relations moment where we maybe need to reach out to that business manager and have a conversation, because in that bank manager's mind, this was a court problem. Okay? Anybody else? Any other? I heard about budgets being an issue, right? Our politicians, we don't write our own budgets. I wish we did, but we don't. So we have to actually make sure that the politicians, the ones who actually fund us, understand what we do. Like I said, that mayor who didn't really understand the 3 branches of government. Okay, so they don't understand, unfortunately, the parameters in which we work. So we talked about the general public, our court users, obviously, attorneys. What do attorneys want from us? Everything, besides everything. They want access to quick legal updates, right? They want information quickly. They want us to be responsive. They want us to get information to them in a timely manner. As opposed to court users, what do court users want? They want to be heard. They want to understand what's going on, right? They don't want us to say words like de novo and pro se and all those Latin terms that confuse them. They don't want forms that are overwhelming and difficult to complete. So our court users, they just want us to speak plainly and speak in a way that they can understand and they can navigate the system. So they have different needs from the courts. What about court staff? Court staff is a big part of who we are working with every day. What needs do our court staff have when it comes to public relations? Communication? Yeah. Do they understand why they're doing what they're doing? When you have a data entry clerk, do they understand the importance of the role that they're playing when they're entering that complaint and the accuracy that's needed when entering that complaint and the problems that could occur, not only for the team around them, but for that court user, for that attorney if data entry is not done correctly. So again, it has this trickle-down effect. So having people understand the big picture and where they fall is a big part of our public relations. It's about our training and the messaging that we give to not only those outside the court system, but our staff as well. Media. What do the media want from us? Besides everything, because I know they want it all. They want access. What if you have somebody calling, they've got a 6 o'clock news channel going out there, and they've got a newscast going out. What do they want? They want information timely, right? They don't want to wait for it. So they want timely and accurate communication. So again, that's why we're talking about public relations. They need to understand who they can go to. Do you have a point person? Do they have a point of contact? Is that person easy to get a hold of? If there's a breaking news story, so that they can get their information out there to the public when needed. Schools. What's important about schools and public relations? Do any of you do any work within the school system? Some of you I know have one judge, one school programs. You might have school tours that go through your courthouses. How many of you have reinvigorated your civics classes in your schools? Because there has become this lack of understanding of the 3 branches of government and the role of the judiciary, right? So again, public relations isn't just about the adult public. It's about those that are still in school and helping them to understand the processes. How many of you maybe have a teen court where you have, actual school-age kids coming in and performing roles that they would in actual juvenile cases, albeit lower level cases, but it gets them involved and it gets them to understand the nuances, because if they're better educated as they become adults, when they hear news stories, they're going to be able to really make an educated determination as to what it is they're hearing. They're going to be able to filter out all that gobbledygook that they see on social media and really get down to the crux of the problem. And then also our community leaders. In the case of that bank manager is part of the Rotary Club or the Kiwanis Club, right? And what do you think that they're going to share at those meetings? They're going to share about that person who's coming back to their ATM vestibule and how the courts are not doing what they need to do in order to stop that person from coming out there. So that message, and I've said this before, is that commercial, and I'm dating myself again, that shampoo commercial where it says, and you tell two friends and they tell two friends and so on and so on. I think it was Wella or something. But anyway, there was a commercial back in the 70s that really emphasized the fact that news travels fast. So when they have a negative experience with the courts, that's what's going to happen. They're not always going to share the positive, but you know when they're cranky or upset, they're going to share the negative. So effective communication, we need to make sure that we're accurate. So when that news media outlet comes to you, are you sharing accurate information? Do they understand the limitations and the information that you can give them? If it's an ongoing case, can you give them information from the judge, what the judge is thinking about that ongoing case? No, right? Are they going to try and ask for it? Sure. So do they understand your limitations, and is that clear? Have you built up a level of trust and communication with your media partners so that they understand that when they go to you, you're going to be timely and you're going to be accurate with the information that you're able to give them? And when you say that you can't give it, it's not because you're trying to be evasive or trying to be difficult, it's because you truly can't share that information. Always important to maintain that neutrality. Again, judges, you don't want having conversations about ongoing cases out in the media, right? So make sure that there's conversations with your judges about if there's media requests. Can their law clerks talk to them? Can, because they all know how to get a hold of chambers and all our emails are out there. I'm sure that they're all very easy to obtain. How to respond when they get those inquiries. And then timeliness. If it's old news, is it really any use to anybody? Or how many of your websites, if you go on your websites now, have accurate information? Or do you still have information maybe about COVID restrictions on there? So if your information out there isn't timely, how much trust and how much faith can they have in the messaging that we present to them? And then, is it accessible? Is the messaging that we're presenting accessible to maybe those with limited English proficiency? Or is it accessible to those that maybe don't read at a 10th grade level, but maybe a 5th grade level? So really take a look at the messaging that you have out there and make sure that everybody can understand that. Also, check your websites. Make sure that your websites are accessible on a cell phone. How many of you have done that where you can actually test it to see that it's user-friendly on a cell phone? Because I don't know about you, but I don't go home and wait till I can open my laptop to check out information. It's right there on our phones. So make sure that it's accessible as well on the electronic devices that are out there and used predominantly. So Judge Steve Liebman and Kevin Burke co-authored a paper on procedural justice. How many of you heard that term before? Procedural justice, procedural fairness, right. So this was a really significant turning point when they basically wrote about the 4 things that people are looking for. And if these 4 things were met in a court interaction, even if there was a negative outcome, an outcome that was not expected, the person still left the procedure feeling as if they were treated fairly and that they understood the process. So they wanted to have a voice, so they wanted to be heard. Don't shut them down immediately. Sometimes people need a few seconds to vent. I know we've all had those phone calls or had those conversations at the window. They don't want to be shut down and say, just get to the point, right? Come on, what can I help you with? Sometimes give them those few seconds just to get it off their chest, and they're going to feel much better about the process. They want to make sure that we're neutral. They don't want to feel like you're treating one side better than the other. I had this conversation with one of my court clerks a while ago. They were in a courtroom, and that court clerk, their son, was on a soccer team, was one of the attorneys in a trial. So before court started, in front of jurors, they were chatting about that weekend's game. Completely innocent, right? However, as a juror or as that defendant, what do you think the perception is there? oof, this is rigged. I'm doomed, right? They know somebody on the inside. Uh-oh, I got problems, right? So you've got to be very aware of that neutrality. So make sure that not only we're aware of it, but your staff are aware of it too. So fortunately, it did not cause a mistrial. However, it was brought to my attention, and I had to have a conversation with a court clerk and said, listen, I understand soccer is great, and I'm so happy that your kids are engaged and that you're friends, but when you're in a courtroom, and particularly in front of jurors and in front of those that are in an active trial, it's very, very crucial that you just do your job and you maintain that professional atmosphere and save the conversations for the soccer field. They also want to be treated with respect. So again, unfortunately, I had to have a conversation with a court user just last week about a conversation they overheard when they called a local court for some information about a traffic matter. And the individual working at that court thought they had hung up the phone. And they didn't. And this person, because again, we're all on our cell phones now, right, was taking notes on their phone about what was told to them so that they could do what they needed to do after they hung up. So didn't realize this person had not disconnected the call. The person at the local court did not realize that they had not hung up the phone completely and went about explaining to their staff what an idiot that court user was. And it wasn't in nice terms. Idiot was not the word used. And so what do you think that court user did? Called me. And I just went, oh. Apologies were not enough. What do you think about how that person who had an upcoming court case in that court is going to feel about the neutrality, about the respect that they received from that court? So now I've got to look at moving that case, which is inconvenient, right? Because now they've got to go somewhere else. However, that perception is there. Also had to have a conversation with the court staff. But again, making sure that they have that respect from start to finish. And even if it is the 50 millionth time you've heard that question today, it's the first time they may have asked it. And then, are we trustworthy? Are we sharing information about why maybe we can't share certain information, why certain information is confidential, why we can't share juvenile records, things of that nature. So it's not enough to just say, well, I can't share that with you, it's confidential. Explain why and give them that information because that builds trust. So what do you think are the consequences of mistrust or miscommunication? So again, procedural fairness, right? They're more likely to comply if they felt that we met those 4 factors in their interaction, even if they didn't have the outcome that they were anticipating. They're more likely to comply than not. If we misstate some information, we give misinformation, we send somebody running around the courthouse to here, there, and everywhere because we thought they needed to go to the family courts, but maybe they needed to really go to the juvenile courts. Do they have much trust in the next person they interact with when they say, oh, no, you belong over here? And then it's our harm to our reputation. Again, in the long run, it's those little conversations throughout the day that have the most impact, ultimately, because people are going to remember the confusing day that they had in the court system. How many of you like to go to motor vehicles? Right? Exactly. You do not want to have that feeling when people have to go to court. And I know that most of the time, people going to court is not a positive interaction, but we can work to make it as easy and accessible and understandable as we can. So how can we promote transparency? Any ideas other than what's up there? How many of you have your published procedures on a website? People can go and look and see what to expect maybe before they go, right? Do you have something that says what to expect in your day in court? It's helpful. If they come better prepared, knowing what to expect, there's fewer surprises and fewer and less opportunity for them to be taken aback and shocked by something. So it's good to have that information out there and ready for them to be prepared. Again, look at what the conversation is about active cases that are ongoing. We had a recent, well, not so recent. Boy, I'm getting old. It's been a minute. But we had a law clerk a couple of years ago that was commenting on a case that the judge they were working for, and it dealt with an animal abuse case. And we all know, animals, children, the elderly, there's some hot button topics out there that you just don't ever want to touch upon because there is a group that will just bring it to the surface. Well, this was an animal abuse case, and the law clerk commented on it. And unfortunately, that caused a lot of problems for that judge, because while that law clerk did what most young 20-somethings do, which is social media, probably thought the information they're sharing was just for them and their friends, didn't realize the stretch and how far that was going to go. So again, make sure that your staff, your law clerks, your secretaries, your court clerks, everybody has an understanding as to what is not commentary, whether it be on social media or in the elevators. I've been on the elevator a couple of times and I've gone, whew, okay, hold up, not a conversation to be had. I was in an elevator just this past week. Boy, a lot's been happening this week. But just this past week, and I overheard a conversation between two, actually an assistant prosecutor and an investigator about a case. And they said, boy, if they found out that I'm the one that found that evidence, this case would be over. And I'm thinking, you have no idea who's in this elevator. It wasn't just the two of them. It was probably 5 or 6 people. And you don't know me from Adam. And you shared that, who knows who was standing right next to me. So make sure your staff is mindful of the conversations they have in elevators too, particularly when they're on an active trial. How many of you have rules about cameras in the courtroom? And how do you handle that? Do you have a single office? Do they have to request permission to bring them in? Who approves that? Is it the trial court administrator's office? Is it the judge in that trial? Managers? Some of you, the judges, will do it. And how many of you have had a case where there's been a huge media interest and you've actually had to limit? And what did you do when you had to limit that? How did you decide? You let them all in. Have any of you had to limit the number of cameras in the courtroom due to public interest? Yes, what did you do?
Public Information Office had lottery for seats.
And did you have, say, one news media outlet that kind of was the pool media, and then they would share whatever footage?
I don't know all the logistics of it, but it was the Britney Spears trial. So it was, yeah, I'm sure they had all of that going on.
And that's good information to have. How many of you have a public information officer in your courts? Those are great, right? Because when you get those calls, you're like, not me, public information officer, right? That's your go-to. So that's my safety hatch right there. So it's good that you have somebody who knows the policies and the procedures about that stuff and who can determine what is and is not allowed. Public information officers are also great because they're a single point of contact for that media person. They're the ones responsible for building that relationship so that they know that they can go to that individual when they have a deadline and they need to get information out quickly. So it's up to that individual to really build that relationship with the media. And it's important for your staff to know when the media calls the main number and asks for a comment, do they know how to respond? How many of you have younger staff members? This is maybe their first role out of college, out of high school, some of them. They don't understand that dynamic, right? At least some of the ones that I've had recently don't even understand the concept of talking on the phone, which is a new thing. They'd rather just chat. So yeah, you have to really kind of have them learn the concept of having a conversation on the phone. And if somebody asks you a question about a trial, maybe you can't answer that. Maybe you have to pass that off to somebody else. So what are some of the traditional public relations tools that we have? What are some things that you have available in your courthouses? I'm sorry, say? Newsletters, yeah. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Kiosks, yeah, those are a great tool. Do you have public information centers in your courthouses where maybe pamphlets or brochures are housed where they can go and maybe look things up, have access to legal documents or self-represented litigant templates that they can fill out motions and things like that? Those are all traditional tools. What other traditional tools would you say? Yes, sir. Translation devices. That's going to be a big one, right? Coming up with AI. I know that a lot of people are trying to test out Google Translate, not in courtroom settings, but at window settings to see how accurate it is and to see what kind of information is out there. Because we all know AI is learning, so AI may not know all the terminology in your local courts. So how accurate is it? So press releases, again, that media relationship, information brochures we talked about, newsletters, courthouse signage. How many of you have thought of signage as being a public relation tool? I know when I had to walk from the hotel here and then go back over, I went, I can't remember how I got here. And I was looking for the signs, and it wasn't that easy. Maybe it's just because I was a little nervous about this afternoon, but I was actually looking for the sign saying, please somebody tell me which escalator to take and which direction to go in, because I don't know where I am right now. But look at your signage when you go back. How many of you still have COVID signage up in your courthouses? Yeah. Some of them are kind of tattered, a little ratty looking, right? Even though, believe it or not, we're looking at almost 6 years out from COVID, which is crazy to me because it seems like just yesterday. But have we looked at our signage to make sure it's accurate, it's timely, and it's relevant to what's going on? And making sure that it's clear and legible, not only to those that are able to read, but maybe those who aren't able to read or who don't read English. Do you use pictures in your signs as opposed to language? And then public information desks or public information cubicles or offices that we talked about, where they can go and they can get some basic information about procedures and how to file certain documents. What about digital and online communications? That's another one that's really big, as we talked about. Most people, their phone is their tool. You don't go anywhere without your phone these days, and when you need information about whether it's the next movie time or whether or not Chick-fil-A delivers or whatever it is, you're Googling it. So have you Googled yourself? How easy is it for you to navigate your website? Have you checked it out lately? How correct is the information on there? If you go on your website and the person in charge of public information retired 3 people ago, maybe it's time for somebody to take a look and maybe do some updates. Do they have online access to forms and calendars? Court services, can they request ADA accommodations on your website? Right? Those are important. Do they even know that they have the ability to request an ADA accommodation or an interpreter? So they need to know that ahead of time. Can they look at online dockets? Do they want to know in real time, is my court case still on? Has it been adjourned? Do they get email notifications or text messaging? How many of you use text messaging? That's great. I know if I didn't get text messages from my dentist, I would forget my appointments all the time, so thank God for those. But I think that's a great tool because I don't know about you, but I've gotten away from email now. I rely on those text message reminders. That dentist might send me an email, but I'm not checking my personal email to see when my next appointment is. I'm waiting for that text now. That's what I'm relying on. And then online portals or kiosks, like were mentioned, those are great for self-represented litigants. Allowing them to go online to see what's available to them. Can they file a form easily right there? So they don't actually have to go into a courthouse and take the time to make time away from the office or have to get people to watch the kids, what have you. They can actually go online at 2 o'clock in the morning if they want and start filling out paperwork if needed. And then updates during court closures or emergency events. I know that on the East Coast, we have hurricanes, we have snowstorms. We've recently, we've become earthquakes, floods. So it seems like we've had a lot of just these natural disasters, and that's been really key in getting the information out there. So make sure that your information is accurate, that you put out on your website. If people have a phone number that they should be calling, make sure that that phone number is checked and the messaging is accurate. All right, we already talked about a public information officer, which is a great tool to have, but how many of you have a media policy or are familiar with it? Can somebody share with me what one of the rules of your media policy is? Just give me one of the rules, because I'm sure that you get phone calls. If you got a call from a newspaper saying, can you give me a quote? I have an article coming out in this evening's edition. Can you tell me something about this case? What would you say to them? Yes, ma'am. She's going to come. What's that? Who speaks for the court?
Chief Judge or Court Administrator.
The Chief Judge or the Court Administrator. So you know where to refer them to. Do your staff know where to refer them to? And they're reminded of it often, I'm sure. That's true. I don't think any of us want to get that call. Do your judges know? Unfortunately, I find that a lot of times we share with our staff, but we kind of forget chambers sometimes in those conversations. And there's that odd, like I said, law clerk or secretary who might have that conversation because they're not always included in our local staff meetings. They're off doing things with their judge in chambers. So do they understand what that policy is? And do you build those relationships with your local media before the crisis occurs? So before you have that, say, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case come into your courthouse near you, have you already built up that relationship so that they know who to go to and they know who's going to provide those answers? And do they trust that the answers they're going to get are going to be accurate and timely? Again, another key factor. And maintaining professionalism and transparency when you talk with the media. You don't want to obfuscate. You don't want to hesitate when you speak with the media. You want to have a clear answer. And if you don't know, say you don't know and that you'll find out. Don't try and fudge it, because that will always come back to bite you. And again, neutral. We don't want to make it seem as if we're weighing one side or the other. If there's an opinion about a case, make sure that whatever information we put out is factually based and that it maintains that neutrality. How many have ever heard of a crisis communication plan? So you have a communications plan, which is, having those press releases. Who's in charge of press releases? Who's in charge of sharing information on a day-to-day basis? But when you have that Amber Heard, Johnny Depp case, what are some other cases that have been in recent news? The Brian Kohlberger case. I just saw in the news that he is going to be sentenced this week. Is he in any of your local courts? No? I know he's out in the Midwest here. So, from Idaho, yes. And have you had to deal with any media when it comes to that case?
No, thank goodness it is not in my jurisdiction.
Oh.
I'm in the 1st district. It started in the 2nd district and then was moved to Boise, so the 4th district.
But again, you're talking about a district that, would they anticipate such a high profile case? Would that be even on their radar? Probably not. So it's important to have those crisis communications plans in place before the Brian Koberger cases come up, before the Amber Heard, Johnny Depp cases come about. You want to make sure that you have that in place, that you've identified who's going to speak for the group. If you don't have a public information officer, then you should identify one person on your team who is going to be that key spokesperson. You're going to make sure that they have the training needed to respond to media questions. You don't want somebody up there looking like a deer in the headlights, wondering, oh my gosh, I'm not sure, let me go back and check, That's not going to instill confidence. Have some templates ready. Have some boilerplate emails or letters set up to go out to media, to go out as a public statement. So you want to make sure that those are already in pocket, ready to go, so that when a crisis does occur, you can just fill in the blanks and get it out timely. And then does your leadership and your staff know about the messaging? Once you've got this crisis that is happening, make sure that your staff know. Here's the person that's going to be doing the messaging. If you get any calls, this is who we go to. And then update and review the plan regularly. A lot of us have coup plans, right? We all have a coup plan. What happens if the building burns down? What happens if there's a hurricane and our building is flooded out? How many of you planned for COVID and had a coup for COVID? Yeah, it kind of blindsided us, right? We kind of had a sense of the what ifs, but I don't know if we ever really knew that it would happen then. And we had to turn on a dime. So make sure you look at your plan regularly, because you don't know, as we evolve as a society, what's coming up next. I don't think 20 years ago AI would have been a thing that we would have even thought about. Now we have to worry about certain things like when we are doing virtual court sessions. Is the person on the screen who they say they are? Is it real or is it Memorex? Again, another dated term, right? Dating myself. But again, you have to think about those things. So take a look at your plan, because the world is changing, and are we evolving with it? Community outreach and education. How many of you are involved in community outreach and education? That's the fun stuff. I like dealing with the school-age kids, and they come in and they like to sit up on the bench and hammer the gavel. And, I really like dealing with the younger school kids. What are some of the programs that you have out there that we've talked about? Teen court. What other programs do you have? Yes, ma'am.
The Supreme Court in New Mexico does the Rule of Law program, where they invite high school students to come and watch oral arguments and explain the process.
That's awesome. Any others? Yes, sir.
Doing tours with homeschoolers today has really enlightened me, because I had a whole different idea and outlook on homeschooling than I do now, and I've learned so much through them, and been able to share that along the way. But it's just an amazing thing to have learned.
Yeah, school tours are great. Gets them into the court. Yes, sir.
Yes, we have a probation department where we have representatives reach out to the schools and basically educate them and parents, school officials as well as parents, on the services that the court provides. I work in a juvenile court system, so we have a lot of that kind of community outreach, as well as our intake department. It reaches out it educates our local law enforcement on the intake processes, so and dealing with juveniles and youth in the community. So
that's great. Yeah, because how many of you have struggled with informing law enforcement about the role of the courts? New Jersey in 2017 went through criminal justice reform, and one of our biggest detractors for criminal justice reform was law enforcement, believe it or not. They did not buy in right away, and I think some of them still have not bought in. And it's a constant messaging, and it's a constant reinforcement of the positive aspects and the positive effects of criminal justice reform. But, law enforcement is another stakeholder that we serve, that we also have to make sure that they understand the messages that we're sending out and that we have good communication with them. Any other community outreach or engagement that you're doing? Yes.
I'll just add that in terms of law enforcement, we have our specialized docket judges engage with the CIT classes or crisis intervention team for our local police. And even though they're focusing on specialized dockets and how we can, better engage with those folks, I think it also serves as a great way to just promote the courts and get that buy-in between the two entities. And we do that quarterly.
How many of you have checked out the iCivics? That's Sandra Day O'Connor. She's really pushed, when she was alive, the civics education being returned to the schools. There are some great resources and tools out there that you can use when you do your school tours, or if you do your one judge, one school outreach. There's a lot of good information out there that is free, that you can use, that really helps to get the public engaged, particularly school-age kids, with what the court's role is and how it can be a positive in the three branches of government. So we talked about student tours. How about jury appreciation? Do you have a juror appreciation week that you celebrate, or do you celebrate them every day? Yes, you can celebrate them when you can get them. It was tough during COVID, right? Because that connection was lost. I actually had to serve jury duty a few weeks ago, and it was the first time in quite a while. And it was nice to get from that perspective, as having to go to the courthouse, to show up, fill out questionnaires, and go through the whole process to see how we're doing. When it comes to jurors, and are we being informative? Do they understand why they're there? Do they understand that they could be there for more than a day? Things of that nature. So it's important to recognize our jurors, and that's also a perfect opportunity for public relations. Do you have your jurors sitting in a jury room just waiting to be called up to a courtroom? Or is staff interacting with them, maybe engaging with them, trying to get some information sharing going on? And that's a perfect opportunity. Law Day. How many of you have a Law Day event? Yeah. We have Law Day posters that will judge, third graders. They each draw a poster based on that year's Law Day theme, and we will judge them and we'll pick a winner, the staff in the courthouse, which is great because it gives the staff an opportunity to walk around and go outside their own divisions and their own sections, and it gives them an opportunity to talk to others and say, hey, what's going on over here? I don't normally get into this side of the courthouse. And there we go. Speaker bureaus. How many of you have a speaker bureau where you go out to various places and you will speak and talk about the courts? Yes. You have the official Judicial Speakers Bureau.
I don't know not sure how official, but there is a Judicial Speakers Bureau and a Judicial Outreach Month. So.
That's awesome. And what groups do you go and talk to normally?
I don't run the program, but they go to school groups, they go to community centers, senior centers, the whole range.
So like we talked about before, Kiwanis Club, the Rotary Club, these are all part of our community, and if they have a greater understanding and appreciation for what we do day to day, there's a lower probability of them believing some of the garbage that is spread out there online, because we all know there's a lot of misinformation about what the courts do and what we can and what we can't do. So speaker bureaus are a great opportunity to get the message out there. How many of you have a podcast? I know there are podcasts out there. Check them out. I'm trying to think, is it Arizona that has the podcast? But there is, oh my gosh. Now I'm gonna. You have AI reporters. And what do the AI reporters do? Yes.
This requires a microphone. Thank you.
So we created, our communications
unit created AI reporters. So they're totally AI made up avatars that look like real people, talk like real people. So when an opinion comes out, because we've had issues with the media not totally understanding a decision, and nobody wants to read 40 pages of an opinion and to write a short media blurb about it. So the justice that writes the opinion also writes the script for the AI
awesome.
reporter. And then we just feed the AI reporter the script. He's Daniel and Victoria. They've got their little business suits on, and they stand in front of our logo and flags and report out what the opinion was and gets the right messaging out.
So is this on your website, or is it?
It's on our YouTube channel.
Oh, you have a YouTube channel. See, now we've got YouTube, podcast, YouTube, AI. Those are great ways of using AI.
And we are looking at software that can take that opinion and turn it into a podcast. We just haven't. Why have real people do it when these guys work 24/7? They never say stutter. Yeah, they don't ask for a raise.
I don't know. This is today. In 50 years, who knows? We may be hearing about it then. But those are all great ways of using that tool to get the information out there. Yes, ma'am.
Jamie on the live chat said Nevada also has a podcast.
Nevada. Okay. Nevada has a podcast.
It's also almost 3:00.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
So Maya Angelou said that I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. So when that person leaves that courthouse, they're not going to remember what form they asked you to fill out. They're not going to remember the information they put down necessarily exactly, but they're going to leave feeling respected or not. They're going to leave feeling like they were understood and heard or not. So it's really important to keep that in mind. So we're sharing information, and the information we share needs to be accurate, yes. However, we also need to realize that there are people behind every docket, every case that we're bringing into the courthouse. And they're leaving with that perception of the courts. And if they have a negative perception, that's going to last. And I had this conversation with a parent once. They called me up, and their teenager, who was a newly licensed driver, was coming to court for the first time for their first ever traffic ticket, and wanted to make sure that their teenager, and this is a great parenting tidbit that I was like, wow, I don't know if my parents would have done that. They would have been like, thrown me to the wolves and said, you deserve it, go and figure it out on your own. But wanted to make sure their teenager understood what to expect and what was going to happen. And could they be there, even though their teenager was 18 at that point. But they wanted to know what could they do, because they wanted this to have an impact. Because what that experience was for that 18-year-old, what's going to happen when they're called for jury duty in 5-10 years? They're going to remember whether or not they were treated respectfully back when they first went to court with that first ever traffic ticket. So we make lasting impressions. And even if they don't come into court that often, they're going to remember, long past, whenever that case is done, how they felt about the whole entire process. So taking a customer service approach is important. So even the little things mean something every day. So court users with specialized needs, think about them. We talked a little bit about ADA accommodations. Are we meeting those needs? Do they feel as if they have access to the courts? Simplifying court processes. Have you all heard about, making sure that the language we use is at a 5th grade reading level? Some say even lower than that sometimes, but making sure that what we share is understandable, that we're not using legalese, that plain language is out there. How many of you have legal assistance versus legal advice training for your staff? Right, that's important because they need to know what they can share and what they can't. And it's also important for the court user so that they understand exactly the information that they're getting. And I have court users that say, well, I know you can't tell me there's a good lawyer in the area. But if your sister were to ask you if you knew a good lawyer, what would you tell your sister? Do they know the tricks of the trade that the court users will sometimes try to get them to share information that they may not be able to give? Are we simplifying court processes? When you go online to file something, is it 50 million different things that you have to go through, or tabs or check boxes in order to get one document filed, or have you simplified it? And then telephone systems, oh, my nemesis. I recently got back from vacation, and I got back from traveling. It was almost 24 hours, and I got home to no internet, no TV, no phone. The last thing I wanted to do was call my service provider and face that dreaded call tree at 10 o'clock at night after just getting off a very long flight and with a bag full of very dirty laundry and trying to figure out how I'm going to get my internet back up, because what did we do without internet 20 years ago, right? So again, how is your phone system set up? Is it user-friendly? Do people have to wade through 50 million different options before they can get to a person? How many of you hit automatically asterisk or 0? Like, human, I don't care about the options, just give me a body, somebody I can talk to. And we've already gone through this about avoiding legalese and using plain languages. Check your signage, check your brochures, make sure that they're readable, make sure that they're accurate, and at an appropriate reading level. Balancing openness with confidentiality. This is where we can sometimes get stuck when it comes to the public, because it can seem that we're being evasive or that we're not sharing information, and we may not be able to share it. Can we share social security numbers? Can we share juvenile information? Can we share criminal case histories? Is there certain information that we are unable to share? Instead of just saying, I'm sorry, that's confidential, explain why it's confidential. There's a court rule or whatever it is that is in your court system that delineates what is determined to be confidential versus public record, and explain to them the difference and why you may not be able to share it with them. We want to make sure that we're protecting people. We don't want information getting out that shouldn't be out there. You don't want victims' information being shared publicly, because that also lessens trust in the court. Because where do they think they got it from, right? E-filing and cybersecurity concerns. How many of you have been affected by a cybersecurity attack in the past 6 months? It seems that it's just ramping up and up and up. And I learned recently that they tended, just from experience, Friday afternoon is when they send these phishing emails, because people are tired on a Friday. They're ready to get their weekend started. So they're not as vigilant or aware of what's coming into their inbox as when they are on, say, a Monday afternoon. So they have got this down to a science. So they time this. So they pick Friday afternoons, and people are clicking on things they shouldn't click on. So make sure that your staff is aware also about what is out there and what's to click on and what not to click on, and how to alleviate some of these concerns. Because when there is a hack and information is leaked, because we now have all our data electronically, right? We're all going electronic, which is great because we don't have to deal with paper files and storage and all that stuff. However, it also makes us a lot more vulnerable. And so when information is leaked that we haven't protected, again, lessens the trust in the courts. So ultimately, it comes down to, we're promoting transparency. We're making sure that people have confidence in our processes, that they trust what we're doing, that we're communicating, and that our communications are understandable. And we're providing access to accurate information, and that our judges and our staff understand the limitations of the information that we can and cannot share out there, and that we have an understanding of what it is the public sees and expects of us. And when we are not meeting those needs, explaining why and getting the messaging out there as to why we can't. Or if there's a need that we're not meeting that we can meet, how do we change that narrative? How do we get that information out there in a positive and effective way. So just some quick tools for us to break it down. Have a communications plan. If you don't already have one, talk about it, get a group together, tabletop it, run through a few different scenarios, and talk about what you would do in certain crises. And designate a public information officer. If you don't have one, then identify somebody on that team who will be your spokesperson, and get them some training on how to communicate with the media. Using plain language, there's a lot of tools out there on the web that you can actually, even AI, you can say, write this at a 5th grade level, reading level, and it will translate it and write it in such a way that is much more understandable. Engage proactively, not just reactively. Don't wait for that crisis to happen. Start now with your conversations with the schools, with your community groups. Get out there and engage, and find those community interactions that will bring positive light to the court system. Train staff in public communication basics. We already talked about that. Talked about how they will engage in the media, about sharing information in the hallways and elevators, and being mindful of how they talk to people in the courtroom, interact with other individuals. And then evaluate and adjust on a regular basis. Again, not many of us were prepared for COVID. We had a COOP plan and we knew what to do if the building was affected by a flood, but we didn't know what to do when none of us could come into work. And so we were scrambling to set up virtual courtrooms and remote work options. And so there was a lot of reaction going on back in March of 2020. So try and anticipate those what ifs and adjust your plans accordingly. So does anybody have anything else to add that you would like to add to the conversation? Any thoughts about how we can get the messaging out there? No? Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.